"Move it, Pops. Clear the sidewalk. We have an admiral coming through." The voice was sharp, laced with the kind of impatient arrogance that only comes from youth and a uniform that was still crisp. The man on the cardboard didn't flinch. He just sat there leaning against the cold brick of the bank building, his gaze fixed on something 1,000 yards and 50 years away. His beard was a salt and pepper tangle. His clothes were worn thin, and a battered tin cup sat empty by his knee. Lieutenant Commander Reynolds adjusted his perfectly white cover, his polished shoes tapping a staccato rhythm of annoyance on the pavement. "Did you hear me?" I said. "Move." He gestured with a dismissive flick of his wrist. "Admiral Thompson is on a tight schedule. We don't have time for this." He looked the old man up and down, his lip curling in distaste at the faded olive drab jacket, a relic from a long-forgotten war. The old man, Elias, slowly turned his head. His eyes, clear and startlingly blue in his weathered face, met the lieutenant commander's. They held no anger, no fear, just a profound and unsettling stillness. "I'm not in anyone's way," he said, his voice a low, growly rasp like stones tumbling in a slow river. "You're a blight." "That's what you are," Reynolds shot back, his voice rising. People on the busy Washington, D.C. C Street were starting to notice. "An eyesore. Now get up and get out of here before I have the MPs drag you away. We're trying to maintain a respectable image here." It was then that the Admiral arrived. Rear Admiral Thompson was a man carved from granite and sea salt, his posture ramrod straight even in his late 60s. He walked with a purpose that had carried him through boardrooms and battlefields. He placed a calm, restraining hand on his aide's arm. "What's the problem here, Lieutenant Commander?" "Just clearing the path, sir," Reynolds said, his tone instantly shifting to one of deferential respect. "This individual is refusing to move." Admiral Thompson's gaze fell upon the man on the ground. He took in the whole picture, the worn-out boots, the hands gnarled with age but resting calmly in his lap, the empty cup. But his eyes, the eyes of a man trained to see what others miss, snagged on something. It wasn't the jacket. It was the way the old man sat, not slumped in defeat but coiled in a posture of relaxed readiness. A technique taught only in the most obscure corners of the service. A way to conserve energy while remaining ready to spring into action. It was a ghost from his own training decades ago. And then he saw the tattoo almost completely faded on the man's wrist, peeking from under his sleeve. A skull wreathed in seaweed with a trident behind it. The old emblem, the one they didn't use anymore. "Stand down, Reynolds," the Admiral said, his voice quiet but carrying an unmistakable command. The lieutenant commander stiffened, surprised. The Admiral took a step forward, ignoring the city bustle around them. He crouched down, bringing himself level with the man on the cardboard, a gesture of respect that made Reynolds' jaw tighten. The Admiral's knees protested, but he ignored them. "It's been a long time since I've seen one of those," Thompson said, his voice a low murmur, nodding toward the faded tattoo. The old man's eyes flickered with the first hint of life the Admiral had seen. He pulled his sleeve down instinctively. "It's just an old drawing," he rasped. "We both know it's more than that," Thompson said gently. He looked into those clear blue eyes, seeing past the grime and the years. He saw the ghost of a warrior. "I'm Marcus Thompson." The man hesitated, then gave a slight nod. "Elias, Elias," the Admiral repeated, tasting the name. "That's a good, strong name. You wore the uniform." It wasn't a question. "A long time ago," Elias confirmed, his gaze drifting away again. Reynolds, unable to help himself, stepped forward. "Sir, with all due respect, we have a meeting at the Pentagon in 30 minutes. We can't afford to be late." Thompson didn't even look at him. He kept his focus locked on Elias. He knew this type of man, the quiet ones, the ones who carried the heaviest burdens and never spoke a word of it. He'd seen them in debriefing rooms, their eyes hollowed out by things they couldn't unsee. He'd seen them at memorials, standing in the back, their grief a silent, crushing weight. He'd never seen one like this on a sidewalk with an empty cup. The disconnect was a physical pain in his chest. "What unit were you with, Elias?" the Admiral asked, his voice soft. Elias shook his head. "Don't remember. It was all classified. Different names for different places. This was the test." The Admiral leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper, a tone meant only for the two of them, creating a bubble of shared history on a busy street corner. "Maybe. But no man forgets his call sign. Not ever. It's burned into you. Who were you when you were out in the dark?" Elias was silent for a long moment. The sounds of the city seemed to fade away. The traffic, the chatter, the distant sirens, it all receded into a dull hum. He looked at Admiral Thompson. Really looked at him, and for a second, the Admiral saw the steel that had been forged in the crucible of some forgotten hell. The old man's shoulders straightened just a fraction. A flicker of the man he used to be. A shadow of immense strength passed over his worn features. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible, a secret shared between ghosts. "Aurora 6. The words hit Admiral Thompson like a rogue wave. He physically recoiled, his breath catching in his throat. His face went pale beneath his tan. Reynolds saw the change and took a half-step forward, alarmed. "Sir, are you all right?" Thompson didn't hear him. He was deafened by two words. Aurora 6, it wasn't a call sign. It was a myth. A campfire story told by grizzled intelligence officers and Tier 1 operators after too many drinks. A ghost story about a unit that never existed. That did the things no one else could or would do. The things that were officially denied before they were even conceived. Project Aurora was a phantom, a black hole in the archives. Its operatives presumed dead or disappeared into the mists of history. Aurora 6 was the leader, the legend himself. A man who was officially listed as killed in action in a training accident in Panama in 1983. The glint of sunlight off a passing bus's window hit Thompson's eyes. And for Elias, the flash was a trigger. The world dissolved. The hard concrete beneath him became the cold, vibrating deck of a submersible. The smell of exhaust fumes turned into the acrid tang of salt, diesel, and fear. He was no longer an old man on Ed-C Street. He was 30 years old, his face blackened with camo paint, the weight of his gear a familiar comfort. He could feel the icy water of the barren sea seeping into the cuffs of his dry suit. He was Aurora 6. His team, 5, 4, 3, and 2, were phantoms around him. Their breathing controlled, their movements economical. Their target was a Soviet submarine, a new Typhoon class nestled in a supposedly impenetrable Arctic pin. Their mission wasn't to sink it. It was far more complex, far more audacious. They were to board it, retrieve a specific set of launch codes from the captain's safe, and get out, leaving no trace they were ever there. An impossible task, a suicide mission, the kind of mission Project Aurora was made for. He remembered the feel of the magnetic clamps locking onto the sub's hull, the muffled clank echoing through the water. He remembered the look in Aurora's eyes. Young kid from Nebraska named Miller. As they prepared to cut through the hull, the kid was scared, but he was solid. They were all solid. The best of the best handpicked from SEALs, from Delta, from Recon. Men who were already ghosts, officially separated from their units, their records sealed. The memory shifted, becoming sharper, more painful. The chaos, the alarm that shouldn't have gone off. A silent klaxon flashing red in the narrow corridor. Shouts in Russian, the smell of cordite. Miller, young Miller, taking a round to the chest, his eyes wide with surprise before he slumped against the bulkhead. Elias remembered dragging him into a small maintenance locker, trying to stop the bleeding with his bare hands, whispering promises he knew he couldn't keep. "We're getting out of here, son. Just hang on. We're going home." But they didn't. He was the only one. He had the codes, but he'd lost his men. He'd completed the mission, but failed his team. The official report, the one he never saw, would say the mission was a success. But for Elias, for Aurora 6, it was the day he died. He'd made it back. But the man he was, the leader, the warrior, he was still there in that cold, dark locker, holding a dying boy from Nebraska. The ghosts were too loud. They followed him out of the service through a series of dead-end jobs, a broken marriage, and finally onto the street where the noise of the city was the only thing that could sometimes drown them out. He blinked. The cold metal of the submarine was gone. It was just the hard brick of the bank building. The face in front of him wasn't Miller's. It was the Admiral's, etched with shock and a dawning, horrified reverence. Admiral Thompson finally found his voice. He stood up slowly, his joints cracking in protest, but his spine was like a steel rod. He turned to Lieutenant Commander Reynolds, and the look in his eyes was something the young officer had never seen before. It was a cold, lethal fury that promised consequences far worse than a bad fitness report. Lieutenant Thompson's voice was pure ice. "Get on your phone now. I don't care who you have to interrupt. Get me a secure line to the Pentagon. Use my override codes. Tell them I have a broken arrow situation." Reynolds stared dumbfounded. "A broken arrow, sir? That's a lost nuclear weapon." "I am aware of what it means, Lieutenant Commander." The Admiral roared, the sound cutting through the street noise like a cannon blast. Passers-by stopped and stared. "In this context, it means we have found something. Someone we thought was lost forever, and is of equal strategic importance. Now do it." Reynolds fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking. He'd never seen the Admiral lose his composure. He scurried a few feet away, his voice a panicked, high-pitched squeak as he spoke into the phone. "Yes, this is Lieutenant Commander Reynolds, aide to Admiral Thompson." "Yes, I know who I'm interrupting." "The Admiral's authorization is Tango Alpha Niner." Thompson turned his back on his floundering aide and faced Elias again. He unbuttoned the cuffs of his crisp service dress whites and rolled them up 2 precise turns. He then knelt again, this time on both knees on the dirty DC sidewalk in front of the homeless man. He took Elias's gnarled hand in his own. "Master Chief," the Admiral said, his voice thick with emotion. I don't know what to say. We read your file at Annapolis. It was required reading for Advanced Strategic Command. The Elias Vance Doctrine on Unconventional Warfare. They told us you died in a training exercise." Elias looked down at their joined hands. "That part of me did," he whispered. Reynolds came rushing back, his face ashen. "Sir, the line is secure. The Secretary of Defense is on." Thompson stood, pulling Elias gently to his feet. The old man was surprisingly light. "You hold him up," he commanded Reynolds, who immediately moved to support Elias, his earlier disgust replaced by a terrified confusion. The young officer put his arm around the frail man, feeling the wiry strength beneath the tattered clothes. The Admiral took the phone. "This is Thompson," he said, his voice all business now. "Authenticate, code word, Neptune's Wrath. I have a situation here. I am standing on the corner of 14th and F Street. I have Aurora 6 in my possession. He's alive." The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. Thompson could practically hear the gears grinding to a halt 3 meters away. Then the line exploded with frantic overlapping voices. The Admiral listened, his face impassive. "Yes, I am 100% certain. The tattoo is confirmed." He authenticated the call sign himself. Understood. He listened for another moment. "Send the car, and send a medical team. We are holding our position." Thompson out. He handed the phone back to Reynolds without looking at it. "You will address this man as Master Chief Vance from now on," the Admiral said, his voice low and dangerous. The man you just tried to shoo away like a pigeon is a living legend. He is credited with single-handedly preventing at least one nuclear exchange that you have never even heard about. The ground he sits on is more honorable than the polished floors you walk on. At the Academy. Do you understand me, Lieutenant? Yes, sir, Reynolds stammered, his eyes wide with dawning horror and shame. He looked at Elias and Master Chief Vance, and for the first time, he didn't see a homeless man. He saw the clear blue eyes, the steady posture, the profound, soul-deep weariness of a man who had carried the world on his shoulders and then been forgotten by it. Within 5 minutes, the street was transformed. It started subtly as a traffic cop rerouted cars at the end of the block, then another, until the entire block was eerily quiet. 3 black Suburbans with no markings and tinted windows glided to a silent stop at the curb. And men in sharp dark suits emerged, moving with athletic grace and speaking into their wrists as they formed a perimeter, quietly and efficiently turning the public sidewalk into a secure zone. The rear door of the lead vehicle opened, and a man in a civilian suit stepped out who, though he carried himself like a 4-star general, had the sharp, intelligent eyes of a career intelligence officer. He walked directly to Admiral Thompson, who saluted. "Admiral," the man said, "Director Evans Dia. You've caused quite a stir, Marcus." "Not me." "Robert," Thompson replied, gesturing toward Elias. "He did." Director Evans turned his attention to Master Chief Vance, taking in the worn clothes, the beard, the exhaustion that seemed to seep from his bones, but like Thompson, he saw beyond it. He saw the ghost that haunted the most classified files in his agency's archives. He walked forward, stopped 3 feet from Elias, drew himself to attention, and executed a perfect sharp salute. "Master Chief Vance," the director's voice was filled with a reverence that stunned Reynolds to his core. "It is an honor, sir. We all thought you were gone. We have been searching for you for 30 years. Elias looked at the saluting man, at the black cars, at the serious-faced agents, seeming overwhelmed. He looked at the spot on the sidewalk that had been his home, at his empty tin cup, then at the disgraced lieutenant commander still holding his arm, and he gently patted Reynolds' arm. "It's okay, son," he rasped. "You were just doing your job. You see what you're trained to see." The words, offered without malice, were a greater rebuke than any shouting could have been, and Reynolds felt a hot flush of shame creep up his neck. He had been trained to see threats, obstacles, appearances, and had completely failed to see the man. An agent brought a thick wool blanket and draped it over Elias's shoulders as a medic approached and began speaking to him in a low, soothing voice, and Elias just nodded, his eyes far away again. Admiral Thompson walked over to Reynolds, who still stood frozen. "You had a lesson today, Lieutenant," the Admiral said, his voice softer now. "Rank, uniforms, medals, they're symbols. They represent something, but they are not the thing itself. The thing itself is honor, sacrifice, the willingness to stand in the dark so others can live in the light. You don't find that on a collar or sleeve. You find it in a man's eyes. You will remember that." "Yes, sir," Reynolds whispered, his voice cracking. They helped Master Chief Vance into the back of the Suburban, and before the door closed, he looked back one last time, his gaze finding the Admiral's. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod acknowledgement. Gratitude, forgiveness, then he was gone, swallowed up by the official black car on his way to a world that had forgotten him, but would now move heaven and earth to make amends. Admiral Thompson stood on the empty sidewalk long after the cars had departed, looking at the piece of cardboard and the empty tin cup remnants of a life lived in the shadows even after the wars were over. A hero, a legend, standing right there, and they had almost walked past him. It is a powerful reminder that heroes don't always wear capes or shiny uniforms. Sometimes they wear old jackets and carry the invisible weight of a lifetime of sacrifice. And our world is full of hidden heroes, Quiet giants who walk among us, their stories untold, and their valor unseen. So the next time you pass someone by, take a moment, look closer. Look into their eyes. You never know when you might be standing in the presence of greatness. Thank you for watching. If this story touched you, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that honor the heroes we must never forget.